I've played Hearts of Iron for 10 million hours and I still don't understand Navy. How often do you hear that? Today we're going to talk about Navy, but we're not going to dig too deep because I don't want to overwhelm you guys. Maybe I'll make this a several part series, but the initial part is I'm just going to talk about the primary buttons. Can you see this? These buttons here. If we talk in depth about specifically these buttons, I think Navy will become unpacked and it might be significantly more easier to understand. So we're not going to talk about naval designs today. Nope, not this. We're not really going to talk about composition either. We're just going to talk about the Navy that the game gives you, how you can supplement it, and then what these buttons do to actually let you use the Navy in a practical way. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to delete all of our army to make it nice and easy. And then we're going to basically merge up the entirety of our Navy. And we do that by selecting each naval group, right-clicking on the reserve fleet, which is the bottom row. Then if you click on this one, it selects them all, and then you press G and it merges them into a massive death stack. All right, let's go 5 speed and let them all merge up, and then we'll go from there. So the first thing you're thinking is, hang on, isn't naval composition important? Having what kind of ships you have and how many ships you have, isn't that proportional system important to know? No, because the game does actually do it for you, and I'll show you how. All right, here we go. The British Navy, which consists of 239 ships. So many boats. With that in mind, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 carriers. We have battleships. We have a few battle cruisers, light cruisers, and an absolute crap ton of destroyers. Okay, let's just talk about roles to begin with. So what do ships' roles tend to have in the Navy? What do they mainly do? And what mission would be most advantageous to be on? We'll start in it by hopping to research because it'd be more visual if I show it from this perspective. All right, so first of all, we have the destroyer. It's the cheapest ship, overall the cheapest to produce. It can't be equipped with armor. However, it can have depth charges. It can have torpedoes. It can have light cannons. It can't have heavy batteries. The purpose of this fleet is just to be a sponge. Your job of a destroyer is just to defend the capital ships who do the damage. Imagine it as different rows. Row number 1 is destroyers. They're taking all the initial damage at first, but then when the destroyers are removed, the torpedo ships can start then to torpedo the capital ships, and torpedoes are incredibly effective at taking out capital ships. So the purpose of a destroyer is just to stop the torpedoes from getting to the capital ships. So they provide a sponge. Secondary, they're also really good at anti-sub hunting because they come with a depth charge of 1. But other ships don't have any depth charge number. However, you can add extra depth charges on to do additional damage. So 1, they're a screening ship to screen the capital ships from getting torpedoed. Secondly, they are anti-submarine by using their depth charges to hit them. And then finally, they are an escort, which is this button here, Convoy Escort. So if you ever play a game and you can see these trade routes here, you know, these lines here, and one of them is red and it has like X's through it, that basically means this mission, convoy raiding, is being performed by the enemy in this region or a part of this trade route. You don't know specifically where because it might be a very long trade route, and you need to basically put them on escort in this region, and then they'll gain a percentage of escorting those convoys to prevent them from harm. And this could involve just completely avoiding the submarines, but then the actual convoys reach their destination, or 2, it could be intercepting the submarines. In this case, it could be a battleship that's doing convoy raiding if you want to, which is a viable strategy for the Germans, but that's a story for another day. And over time, this percentage will increase by how much convoy raiding you've got. Let's actually show it. Convoy escort, and it goes 100% immediately. If you were getting raided in a region, it would take time for it to go up. And as you see, as more time does go up, you gain more and more convoy raiding efficiency. Be aware, the more convoys that pass through this region, the higher it will be able to defend all the convoys in that region. So for instance, having submarines in the English Channel is effective because there's a lot of trade that moves through the English Channel. However, the downside is a shallow sea. You can see that submarines have an additional visibility. So there's pros and cons, as you can see. However, the Bay of Biscay tends to be a really good location to convoy raid. Anyway, we're talking about destroyers. Let's not move on. Back into research. So that's the destroyer. The next is the cruiser. Now, this is a hull of a cruiser. It can be made into 2 kinds of ship. It can be made into a heavy cruiser, which has heavy batteries, which can shoot over the top of the screening ships and then hit the battleships. That's what heavy attack is. It shoots over the top of it. Alternatively, it can be made into a light cruiser, and light cruisers are kind of strange. They kind of behave the role as a destroyer, but they're more expensive. They're significantly faster. Are they faster? I always wonder this. So the speed of a basic destroyer is 35 knots. A basic cruiser is 32 knots. Okay, it does look like the initial destroyers are faster, but then the more up-to-date cruisers do get fast. This is a Mark III, 41 knots. They tend to be fast anyway. And the role of a cruiser tends to be either to provide additional screening as a light cruiser. They can also be anti-submarine if you put them with depth charges. However, they're more expensive, so you get less of them. And they can as well do the role of a convoy escort. However, the number of escorts affects your ability to convoy escort. You need over 100 destroyers as a part of 100 convoys to be effectively convoy escort them, if it makes sense. As you can imagine, having less cruisers overall means their ability to escort efficiently is significantly less, hence the reason why the destroyer is king there. However, cruisers can have armor on them as well, so they can be a significantly more effective screening ship when it comes down to the amount of damage it can receive. I think the sweet spot for a cruiser is two things: spotting, which I'll talk about in a bit, and then also being a more effective screen than a destroyer because it has more HP and it has more armor, because you can't put armor on a destroyer, but you can put armor on a cruiser. These are the armors here. So potentially what you could do, which is an effective strategy, is have a single role light cruiser that behaves as a destroyer for screening purposes, just so it can take lots of damage. Basically a tank to stop torpedoes hitting the heavy cruisers. The second role that I think is viable as a cruiser is patrol, which is spotting. It's this first button. Can you see this? Z, patrol. Now, what is patrol? Patrol is when you go into a sea region and you look for enemy fleets. Now, this could be destroyers, this could be carriers, this could be cruisers, this could be convoy radios. Basically, any ship that's operating in this said region. If they're in port, they cannot be spotted. And if they're not in that specific region, they can't be spotted. And also, you don't spot convoys as well, as far as I'm aware. Now, why are cruisers good for spotting? They're fast. And speed is a factor for spotting. So we'll select this town class. Is this a good example? No, it's not. This is a better example, this version here. Now, destroyers can't have catapults. And you're probably thinking, catapults in World War II? What's Dave on about? Well, it's this ship here. It's a spotting ship. It basically can spot submarines and it can spot surface craft. And that gives extra stats towards spotting. Plus, as I mentioned earlier, the speed of cruisers tends to be higher than destroyers, other than some smaller examples. And speed feeds into spotting, and as well as your spotting chance can feed into spotting as well. So basically these stats. So there we go. Speed, knots, surface detection, this number, and also sub-detection, this number. But also another factor too is your surface visibility has an impact on spotting. If you can see, it's like a 3-tier system. The bottom one is visibility. Spotting is also a matter of like a cat and dog. It's kind of constantly chasing each other, basically being able to spot the enemy while not being spotted yourself. So if your ship is difficult to spot, you are the perfect spotter. So fast, has spotting chance, and also is very hard to detect as well. If you go for trade interdiction, the doctrine, you do get bonuses to not being spotted. So for instance here, can you see this? Let's see if we can find a good example. There we go. Surface detection plus 10%. I believe that's detecting other ships though. It's not reducing your chance of being spotted. I swear. Is it this one? No, okay, I'm wrong about that. Okay, I thought this decreased the chance of you getting spotted, but it's actually extra surface detection. That's interesting. Okay, fair enough. Anyway, so cruisers, light cruisers, specifically light cruisers, the ones that have got the small batteries, are beneficial because you can put catapults on them. These ones which add extra surface detection as well as sub-detection, which can add towards spotting chance. It's a bit one-dimensional to talk about spotting, because what do you do when you've spotted something? Do you engage it or do you call for help? We'll talk about that a little bit later, but patrol is one part of two parts of a mission. Patrol is to see, and then strike force is to intercept, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Anyway, light cruisers are used for spotting, and they also can make very beefy screening ships because they can put lots of thick armor on them, which increases the HP and armor, which reduces the overall amount of damage that this ship can take overall. Plus, it can do all the things that a destroyer can do, such as torpedoing, as well as depth charges. I think the depth charge is the last one. Yeah, depth charges. So you can do a little bit of everything. So a lot of the time you can ask yourself the question, well, what's the point of making a destroyer when I can make a light cruiser? But you just can get more number of them. So for every one single light cruiser, there's probably going to be about 4 or 5, depending on the cost of destroyers, which will add more potential escort efficiency. Okay, what's the other version of a cruiser? You can go for a heavy cruiser. Now, how do you know if it's a light or a heavy cruiser? It's this star here. This basically says a star with an X. It tells you this is a screening ship, okay? Now, how would we make a cruiser become a heavy cruiser? Where you put a medium battery onto it. One of these ones, heavy battery 1, which you can see here, it gives heavy attack. And what did I say earlier about heavy attack? Heavy attack shoots over the top of screening ships to hit the battle cruisers and the battleships, the capital ships. So they come into 2 categories: screens, which are on the front line, and then capital ships, which are on the second line. And there's a third category, I guess. There's also carriers, which are on this like third line back, the one step further back than the battleships. That's why it's so difficult to hit carriers with torpedoes or light attack, because they're so unbelievably far away from the battle line. Anyway, heavy cruiser, and you can see now this is now a capital ship. So capital ships kind of have a different role. They sit in the middle line, the back line, and they don't do the screening role anymore. They've got heavy attack, so they try to shoot over the top. Now, they will still engage screening ships on the front if they've got some light attack. And light attack is more effective against screening ships. The deal with the heavy cruiser is it's kind of the jack of all trades. The downside of it is because it's an expensive ship, you have less numerous amounts of ships and it takes a lot of damage. Because if this gets hit by a torpedo, it's going to get sunk. So in the end of the day, you can't just have a capital ship on its own. You need to have screens in the front line as well to absorb the damage. It kind of does everything that a light cruiser can do. So you can have what you call the jack of all trades ship, which basically does a little bit of everything. It's a little bit over the top, but if you wanted to, you could have a armored cruiser with light attack, screening capabilities. However, because it's classed as a capital ship, it will only sit on the back line, not on the front line. It's got sonar, so it can detect submarines. It's got heavy attack, so it can fire from the back line. Anti-air, spotting capabilities, and depth charges. You can have the jack of all trades. I'm going to be fair with you right now. Making a ship that does everything is probably not the best thing to do, because you can do that with planes as well, but you tend to find that if you make a plane for a certain role, it tends to do that role more effectively. So I wouldn't ever recommend this. However, if you guys have found like a really cool design for heavy cruisers that is effective, feel free to go for it. But my understanding is the meta is they stack lots and lots of light attack onto these. Oh, they don't allow you to do that anymore, so they have to be secondaries. Okay, so this is as far as I'm aware, the meta of heavy cruisers, where you stack lots of light attack. I think the idea behind it is that you clear the screens really quickly, so therefore your torpedo ships can start hitting the capitals immediately. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on this too long because we've got a lot to cover. This is meant to be a basic overview and we're already going too deep. So destroyers done, cruisers, lights, and heavies. Let's talk about capital ships. It's weird talking about capital ships because we've just talked about capital ships, because a cruiser can become a capital ship as well. So they will sit on the back line. They will shoot over the top of the screening ships with their heavy attack and intercept other capital ships. However, with the light attack that a heavy ship has, it will still start hitting screens on the front line as well. And be aware, there's not 100% screening efficiency because you've got not enough destroyers or light cruisers. These can get torpedoed, and when the capital ships get torpedoed, they get knocked out incredibly quickly. Anyway, a heavy ship, I mean, it pretty much what I've already described as a heavy cruiser. It fires from the back line. It tends to have a lot of armor. It can take a lot of abuse, and it tends to have the biggest possible batteries in the game. So therefore, you can do an exceptional amount of damage. The battery damage is significantly higher. You can put more armor onto them. The best way to build a battleship is to build a battleship that has the heaviest amount of armor. Now, I don't even really feel like I need to cover this very well. You can also make a battle cruiser as well. The only advantage of a battle cruiser over a battleship is the speed. So you're basically getting all the effectiveness of a battleship, but just a little bit less armor. I always question if this is really effective overall, because the price difference isn't overwhelmingly massive, and they behave just the same way as a capital ship would anyway. I suppose if you're trying to make a slightly cheaper battleship, you would go for that. But overall, the way naval doctrine evolved over time, battle cruisers eventually became battleships anyway. But anyway, this is what a battle cruiser is. I don't really feel the need to mention it, but overall, you can get battle cruisers and battleships. And as far as I'm aware, correct me in the comments, guys, I don't even think battle cruisers and battleships have any different changes to the configurations. What designates a battle cruiser from a battleship? The armor. So you basically have battleship armor or battle cruiser armor, and that designates the category. And my understanding is battle cruisers are a little bit better for trade interdiction because they have more bonuses. I think it affects everything. Oh no, it doesn't. Look, so if you can see here, this doesn't give bonuses to surface detection. So what kind of trade interdiction does is tries to make the most of every ship you've got in your navy by giving them like spotting chance and detection abilities. So that's the reason why if you've got a smaller fleet, trade interdiction tends to be a little bit more effective. because you're kind of like using every ship to its maximum capabilities other than focusing on one specific thing. As you can see here, the bonuses tend to lean more towards battle cruisers. But there are some battleships in here as well anyway. It does look like some of the bonuses do gear toward battle cruisers for trade interdiction, which is something nice to know, I suppose, if that's the doctrine you're going to be going for. All right, next up, carriers. So carriers are a special category which basically sit on the back line, but then one step back. So let's say that again. Carriers, then battleships, then screens. And they sit as far away as possible. They just hit over the top. It's the same thing as before, really. You will find that torpedo ships that are based on carriers tend to be more effective against heavier ships like these ones than the screens. So you tend to find that carriers are not very good at knocking out screening ships, but they're very effective at dropping bombs and torpedoes onto the heavy ships and other carriers. So yeah, it's cool to have an extra ship on the back line, and you are capped at a maximum of 4 of them until you start to suffer from sortie penalties, which just basically means there's less planes can fly in the air. So in this circumstance, you never really want 5 carriers. You kind of want 4 and put as many planes on it as possible. These are all old ships, like converted battleships, which is basically the first category here. There's 2 different kinds. So the first carriers were converted versions of regular ships. In this case, this was converted from a battleship to a carrier. This was converted from a cruiser to a battleship. It was like a wonky strategy in the old days where everyone would try and convert the entire fleet to carriers, but it was pointless really, because once again, more than 4 carriers per fleet suffers from a sortie penalty, and the penalty is kind of big compared to the amount of planes that you can put on these ships, so it's not really worth it. The best strategy is to get 4 carriers and have the maximum amount of planes that you can put on each of them, and that will get the most amount of planes in actual combat by putting as many hanging bays on them, which increases the deck size to 80. But you can go as high as that if you go for the more modern up-to-date carriers. But can you even go for the modern carriers? That's the question, because the game tends to run on later and carriers are very expensive to make. So it is even worthwhile going for the Carrier 3. I don't even know. There's not really much to say, really. They are a part of your strike fleet, and they will engage the battle when available. There is one caveat, though. Carriers are OP, but if the weather isn't good, which I'll find some bad weather. There's going to be some bad weather somewhere in the world, isn't there? You tend to find that bad weather effects happen at sea more frequently. And you can see here, storm is happening. So your ability to do carrier traffic is reduced by 80%. So if you were, let's say, a carrier-based fleet, and you engaging a battleship fleet, there is a high chance that if it's a storm happening, that those carriers may be significantly less effective for that specific battle. There are ways you can mitigate that, though, because there is a incremental weather experience minus 40%. So there's a chance that if you are going for a carrier battle fleet, this one would be an effective one to go for, because it would reduce that chance of engaging a capital ship fleet and then losing all your carriers, which is a possibility. And last and definitely not least, the Submarine. They're a single role craft. They simply do convoy raiding. Now, I suppose you could do mine laying with them if you wanted to. And suppose you could also do spotting with as well, which I've seen some kind of weird spotting roles for submarines as well by putting big radar onto them. I suppose, to be fair, a lot of these ships can be done in different roles if you configure them, but their primary role is convoy raiding. And you just, let's say, we'll break these up by right-clicking on the subs, select all subs, select the sub fleet, and put them on convoy raid and put them here. And as you can see, the percentage goes up over time. Be aware that if you select multiple sea regions, the percentage chance of intercepting convoys goes down. So you really want to stay to 100%. And the question is, how do you keep it 100%? Well, you split off the fleet so they can operate separately. And if you press D, which is split, we'll get to 100% again. And then we could go for another region with 3 fleets, and then 4 regions, and then we're down to 61%. And then the same thing you could do again, really. You press D again and get 100% once again. Once again, this just basically means that when convoys go through these regions, the chance of them making out the other side is significantly reduced. And if you've not got the full convoy raiding efficiency, it's not really that worth it as much as it should be. Be aware that when you do split them off, they are more vulnerable. 4 fleets, all with 10 submarines in them, is going to be able to not survive as effectively as 10 on their own. Just be aware of that, particularly you are using submarines for combat effectiveness, which I wouldn't recommend, but is a thing if you want to do that. Okay, let's talk about the buttons. So here we go. So naval exercises, mad OP. If you've got a fleet that's behind and you're engaging an enemy with significantly more ships, having naval exercises and getting your ships to level 3 is massive. Look at this penalty here. This is a carrier that's a level 1, which is a greenie, fresh. And they're suffering from a big penalty to the fighter efficiency sorties, naval damage, and naval defense. Then you got a level 2 here, which has no bonuses or penalties. Do we have a level 3 anywhere? No, we have to exercise them. Anyway, this works the same way. You can hold shift and left click on it and it'll exercise to level 3 before they go back to base automatically. It eats into your fuel massively and you gain loads of naval experience from this. So if you're ever going to do this, be a nation like, I don't know, Soviet Union or USA, which you can do this indefinitely, which I think is really OP and it shouldn't be a thing, but it is what it is. Or, for instance, import lots and lots of fuel. And you can see there's a level 3 here, and this destroyer is getting a 20% attack damage bonus and a naval defense bonus. These bonuses all stack up, and as you can see, being green, he suffers from big penalties. Kind of meets in the middle somewhere there for a lot of them, though. Carrier has extra sortie efficiency, and you can see the bonuses are pretty much the same. It's kind of weird that it's 9.9% damage and 6.6% defense. That's so weird. Why those numbers, Paradox? Okay, next button is patrol. So as I mentioned to you, your fleet will go into this region and spot. Now, it's not recommended you have capital ships on this because capital ships consume a large amount of fuel. So the best composition of ships for patrol is going to be light cruisers and destroyers because they are fast and they usually have good spotting chance. Be aware that not only catapults can affect spotting chance, these ones, but also radar can affect it. But as you can imagine, radar doesn't come in later into the game, but it is superior to catapults later in the game. As you can see, it adds extra surface detection, but it also increases hit chance, so it has extra bonuses as well. It's simple as that, really. So let's say we're going to break off all the light cruisers and put them on patrol here, and now they're spotting in this specific region. Here's the deal with spotting. You only want to be spotting in regions where enemies are present. So if you hover over a region, you can actually see that? Friendly supremacy 0%, enemy supremacy 0%. So if there's no enemies in these specific regions, there's no reason to really spot them. Remember, you are consuming fuel when you're in these regions, so just be aware of that. If you're covering multiple regions with a single fleet, they will basically take turns going into one region into another. You can split them in half by pressing D, and then you can cover both regions. And I think they keep swapping, or maybe they just stay here. And it makes sense, they're just going to stay here, aren't they? There's no point to swap. Anyway, regardless, you can max the regions out, and they'll basically take turns looking in these regions, spotting enemy ships. Now, if your ships aren't very fast, or haven't got very good radar, or haven't got good spotting capabilities, such as not having catapults, you might reach a point that you'll spot an enemy fleet, you'll know an enemy fleet is there, but you can't get a positive match on the ships that are in that region. What does that mean? It just means is they need to know how many ships are there, where they're located, to be able to intercept them. So you might know that there's enemies here, but you don't know there's composition in the specific location to actually intercept them. And that moves nicely onto the next one, which is Strike Force. Now, Strike Force is weird, okay? Because Strike Force just basically means they stay in port, but if they get a spot off in a region, they'll come out of port and then intercept that fleet. So what is going to happen right now? Well, nothing. It does do one thing, though, when it's not actively in combat. It increases naval supremacy. Can you see naval supremacy 17,000 there? Now, naval supremacy is effective because it increases your chance of doing a naval invasion. You need 50% naval supremacy in a region to activate a naval invasion. So one strategy you see me do in a lot of my games is this. Can you and then watch my videos and see me doing this? Now, this is a little bit broken in my opinion because the ships aren't really doing anything, but you have the ability for a massive region, only the ones in green, by the way. If you hold ship, by the way, you can remove the region. And it's projecting naval supremacy. I mean, this is doing two things. It aids your naval invasion chance, but then also secondary, it denies the enemy's ability to do naval invasions, which I think is really wonky. The fact they're in port, they're doing absolutely nothing, but they're denying the enemy naval supremacy, which is kind of strange. But anyway, that's the way it worked. So you have one fleet here spotting, and then you have another fleet on Strike Force. And the only fleet that's actively in the ocean is the spotting fleet here. You see with the binoculars here, it's basically saying that what role it's on. So the way it would work is you would spot an enemy fleet, you will see a percentage bar of the spotting, basically gathering intel of knowing the exact location and the ship composition. When it gets to 100%, what will happen, depending on the risk, and this is this button here, it may engage the enemy fleet and try and take it out if it thinks the risk is low enough, or it might choose to run away but call the Strike Force to intercept it, depending on what it spotted. So if it spots a few destroyers, it might be like, well, the risk is super low here. We'll call the Strike Force, but we'll also intercept ourselves with the ships that we've got because we know there's a chance that we could wipe them out without even needing the Strike Force. However, the Strike Force might arrive and do all the damage as well, so both might happen. Another thing might happen too is if you have this on, let's say, never engage, which is a strategy you might use just for spotting ships, is they'll spot, they'll call the Strike Force, but they'll actively try to avoid combat. They may still take some damage because they might have to get close to the enemy ships to spot them, to see them, before they run away. On the other end, basically you can say always engage, which is kind of like the death stack strategy, which we'll explain at the very end. But what it basically means is, well, if you spot something, always engage it. And the problem with that is you might engage some unbelievably deadly fleets that might actually wipe out all your spotting fleets. And it's really bad when you lose your spotting fleet because you have then nothing to work with. So just be aware of that. Be aware this button is OP. In some situations, the AI may choose to run away because it thinks it might not win. But some instances, if you slog it out on always engage or high risk, there's a chance you actually might win. And that's why in some weird scenarios, you might be like, well, I'm Germany, I'm making a decent fleet here, I'm engaging Britain, I can win this, but I keep running away. And when you run away, you don't attack, but the enemy can attack you. So you run away, you take all this damage, but then you don't actually win in the long run anyway. So it might be even better just to go for always engage. It's up to you. Risky though, be aware of that. Very, very risky. Anyway, next button. So we've covered strike force, we've covered patrol. Convoy raiding, it is what it is really. You are intercepting convoys, so you will be intercepting divisions that move by the ocean, in which you'll knock them out and lose. The enemy will lose a significant amount of manpower and equipment. You will be also intercepting supply routes, which means that supply in regions that are disconnected from the mainland will get significant supply. So for instance, if Germans are going to do a sea line, you're going to get full control of convoy raiding this region. This area will all be red and they'll get stuck in this region. They'll not be able to expand out of there. With that as well, you are also going to be intercepting supplies. So you can see that we've got a oil supply coming from America. So if this was intercepted, only a portion of the supplies will come through, but you'll still pay the full price of 15 civilian factories. So be aware of that. In some instances, you might have to import double the amount to try and overcome the convoy raiding. Remember, the percentage is based on how many convoys it can intercept. If it's one submarine, it might be limited to how many convoys it can actually disturb before it arrives. It's not just a matter of sinking the convoys, it's also a matter of causing them to have to divert into different directions, which can affect their ability to arrive in their destination. So divisions moving by ocean, could be naval invasion, could be transport, resources, as well as active supply. And that's what convoy raiding actually does. And there's a strategy as Germany as you go full convoy raiding to try and cover as much of the North Atlantic as possible, or the South Atlantic, or all the Atlantic. Why not? All right, next up is escort. As I mentioned to you earlier, it's mainly destroyer role, and it is simply to prevent convoy raiding. Be aware that other ships can convoy raid, not just submarines. So in this case, if it is a stronger ship, like a light cruiser, there might be instances where your screens meet screens, and because they're stronger, then you might wipe you out. It's a rare one, but it's a possibility. But if you are actively getting convoy raided, escort efficiency is the win. Be aware though, you're not actively always sinking enemy submarines when you do this. You might be just defending your own convoys, but not actively participating in knocking out the subs, because you might have not enough detection to actually see where the submarines are, hit them with depth charges and knock them out. You used to be able to naval strike ships that are on convoy raiding and hit them, knock them out really quickly, but now spotting of submarines is a lot more difficult than it used to be, and it's not as easy as it used to be. You usually need a combination of ships on the ground, well, in the sea, as well as planes in the air to actually effectively spot ships. To be fair, spotting is a complex thing because there's lots of variables that can factor into it. Another example that affects it quite frequently is actively radar, and that's why you get an extra spotting chance in these additional regions, because that's what it does. So in this case, putting subs into the English Channel is usually a bad idea because the radar is also going to affect your ability to raid effectively without getting spotted. This is a hard one to judge because how many convoys do you need and how many convoy escorts do you need is difficult. It's just based on this percentage here. So if this percentage is below 100%, you basically need more submarines or more individual fleets to be able to effectively convoy raid or convoy escort. Convoy raiding and convoy escort kind of work in synergy, and they're not specifically one region either. You could spread them out over multiple ones, unlike patrol, which has to be one region at a time. Next one is mine laying. In short, it reduces naval speed, which naval speed can affect spotting. So if you want additional spotting chance and not get spotted, mine laying is the way forward. Top that off as well, it increases the accident chance as well. An accident chance could just result in damage affecting your ships overall. It's a really good way of like hogging a sea region and basically denying anyone from moving into that said sea region. However, you do tend to find that mines aren't very effective in big oceans like this. Can you see? No, it's not this one. It's deep oceans. There you go. All ships having decreased chance to hit mines at minus 75%. So for instance, mine laying in these regions is somewhat effective. However, mine laying in the deep oceans is just kind of pointless. I won't bother doing it. Also, ocean is 75%, and then this is deep ocean, which is 95%. So there's just absolutely no point of putting mines in these said regions, unless you're going on a mine frenzy and just putting them everywhere, I guess, just for a laugh. But they are definitely more effective in shallow seas like this. because there is an increased chance of hitting a mine. Oh, so it's actually the opposite rotation. Chance to hit mine minus 50%. Oh no, I'm actually completely wrong. Minus 50% is the shallow sea. So mines that like have a penalty for all sea regions apart from archipelagos. There you go. So mines are like mad effective in archipelagos, but then every other sea zone suffer from a penalty. Fjords and archipelagos. There you go. That's why you can do a strategy where you can deny really powerful capital ships in the Baltic, because you can like make a big navy as Sweden but avoid capital ships and then dominate Germany by basically mining and hiding in the fjords and archipelagos. One final thing that mines do is if you max the mines out of 1,000 in a region, you get a bonus to naval supremacy as well. That'll increase your ability to do a naval invasion. So that's one example where you drop mines, but not necessarily do that to hinder their navy, but to boost your own navy, for instance. And also minesweeping is basically the same thing. Anyway, finally, we have naval invasion support. So it is what it is, really. So when a naval invasion activates, the fleet will hug right next to those divisions, as in a D-Day scenario, to try and prevent them getting intercepted. And if they do get intercepted, they can effectively fight a battle between two ships. Also, it gives shore bombardment for all regions it covers. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but now it means that if there's ever a naval battle that happens in any of these regions now, anything that borders anything in the green will suffer from the shore bombardment penalty, which works exactly the same way as air superiority, which reduces enemy breakthrough and enemy defense, depending on if they're attacking or defending, which can be super effective, by the way, for coastlines. Be aware, this does not use any fuel, a bit like Strike Force, unless they're actively engaging in something, which could be a naval invasion, supporting it, or a shore bombardment happens. So if a battle was to happen in Calais here, the shore bombardment penalty would apply, or bonus, depending on if you're attacking or defending, and you will start to lose fuel. And a lot of people get confused, like, where's my fuel going? I don't understand. I'm not even engaging my ships in any fleet. Well, they've came out and they're doing shore bombardment. You can't actively see it. It'd be kind of nice if there was an animation of them firing from the coastline and actively let you know, but it doesn't. Be aware that naval invasion support and Strike Force, they kind of work a little bit in synergy sometimes. You can use one or the other. They both project naval supremacy, so you can do your naval invasions. But the difference is naval invasion support will auto shore bombard and auto defend an actual naval invasion when it's actually happening. You tend to see me use them both interchangeably. Okay, you made it to the very end, okay? And of course, there's so much more to cover than what I've shown in this video. I've just basically touched the surface. But I'm going to show you the magic button, because you said, compositions, Dave? How do you make the perfect composition? Well, I didn't want to show you this in the video, but I'm going to show you a way in game that you can do it. And it is the magic composition button. So if you've got a depth stack, in this case, you can hit this button, and this will evenly distribute all the ships into their effective roles. Boom. This is insane. A lot of people forget this button's even here. So we have a carrier fleet here. It is what it is. It's a Strike Force carrier fleet. Next up, another carrier fleet. Then we have a... Ooh, what would this be? I think this potentially could be an escort fleet, because it's got some light cruisers and it's all screens. I presume potentially spotting. Another escort. We have a Strike Force here with capitals. Another Strike Force, Strike Force. Then we have a Convoy Raiders. Convoy Raiders. And at the very end, I think these are the spotters. Yeah, the spotters are the last ones, the 17 at the very end. So you now can see it's distributed them into actual roles that you can actually use as buttons as below. Isn't that really cool? No? Is that cool? Anyway, the very final caveat. This applies to single player and less so multiplayer. If you were to make a depth stack, which is like this, what you can also do is put them on always engage, break off the split, and put them on patrol. It is what it is. What they're basically going to do is spot enemy ships, always engage them. You don't even need a strike force. This is effective for the United States. Other nations that have a lot of oil can use this one as well. But this just shows a kind of a mid to late game strategy you can do with ships. It isn't historical because this would consume a ridiculous amount of fuel. But in this scenario, you could do this and it would be an effective strategy other than using the combination of patrol and strike force. My understanding is strike force is superior with patrol because you don't suffer from a big positioning penalty. In short, positioning is either 100% or less than that. And when you drop below 100% positioning, you suffer from a penalty. And one of the most common penalties you experience from a position is if your fleet is significantly bigger than the other fleet. Meaning it's harder to coordinate your fleet into active battle. It's a penalty for having a death stack navy, basically. But your fleet is so big and has so many stats, it doesn't really matter. And you can see quite a lot in my UK games, French games to a certain degree, and definitely USA games, I do a debt stack Navy like this. It's an old strategy. It's not as effective as it used to be. But man, if you don't really understand Navy, it is effective. Just keep an eye on your fuel, okay? Because it will eat all your fuel. Guys, what would you like me to cover next, okay? Would you like me to actually show you actual builds of destroyers, cruisers, and heavy tanks? There's no tanks. And carriers to show you how to build them so they're more effective. Would you like to see actual live demonstrations of them actively doing their missions in active combat? So maybe that would help you. Maybe you'd like me to talk about doctrines or officer corps, maybe? Let me know in the comments, boys. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more of this kind of content. If you do like what you see, please let me know. Comment below. If you want more content, give this video a click. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.